Hello, listener. It's Samson Folk. I'm glad you've joined me for the Raptors Weekly Podcast by myself for this one to discuss the week that was. And I don't think there's any better place to start than with the trade deadline. And we can start with the positives, I think is the best way to do it. So the positive is that Thaddeus Young is a better player than Goran Dragic in that apparently they're going to be actually using Thaddeus Young. So who is Thaddeus Young? Why is he more useful than Goran Dragic? So Thaddeus Young is a guy who has been in the league for as long as the three-point revolution or the massive volume from three-point land revolution has come and gone, or not gone, just come. But the thing is, he hasn't really added that to his game. Yes, he shoots roughly 34% from three, has hung around the low 30s in his best seasons, and can occasionally make one out of the corner. That is part of his game, but he's mostly been a tweener, a guy who in spaced out offenses, and even prior to that, was in between the two front court positions, or maybe even in between a 3 and a 4, depending on how you viewed him. And he was able to get his own shot at the rim more than a lot of his contemporaries at his size, save for the superstars, right? And that was kind of his calling card, being a guy who could create a little bit on offense, be a heady cutter, make some of those, garbage manning some plays, getting extra possessions for his team, setting some screens, being helpful, and then just a little bit of offensive pop. And defensively, I think he's always been brutishly strong for his position. He's always had a fantastic steal rate, really active hands, and hustles. And that is the cliff notes of his career, as a gritty defender who would rate as quite good, especially for some seasons, with a little bit of offensive pop. And the league trended away from the things that made him successful immediately. And he didn't really catch up until last season. And last season, we saw his assist rate jump, like not even jump really, just vault into a completely different stratosphere. If you were to take that assist percentage from last year, which was around 27%, it would be very, very close to overtaking Fred for first on the team. And it would be 5 percentage points above where Pascal is. And, Scotty is a terrific passer, but Scotty's at like roughly 14%. OG is at 11%. These are decent numbers for those guys, but it just speaks to where Thad is as a passer, both as a hub on the elbows and as a short roller. And there's zone busting. There's some horn stuff that's been run for him. But generally, you put him in a position where advantage is being created off of a set action, and he's making the right play as a passer a very large percentage of the time. And while the Bulls weren't very good last year, that doesn't mean that those skills aren't transferable to a new offense, to a new situation. And I think that the Spurs, for the most part, were just wanting to really indulge in their youth revival, that type of thing. I don't think it's that Thaddeus Young has completely fallen off and no longer has viability as an NBA player. I think that what happens with certain players is maybe they lose a little bit of juice, but they're an ill fit on some teams that were taking on extra contracts and all kinds of stuff to maximize assets. And that's exactly what happened to Thaddeus Young, caught up in the DeMar DeRozan sign-and trade. He went to San Antonio, a team that really didn't have much in the way of an idea of how they wanted to use him. And so there he was, not playing a ton of games. He only played 26 this season. And so he comes to Toronto, and the fit makes way more sense. But how much of that is going to be realized on this roster? How much is Nick Nurse going to want to play him? What really are we expecting of him? And so I guess I'll walk through the worst case expectations and maybe the best case. And so if you want the more concise version of whatever I'm about to talk about, you can go to raptorsrepublic.com and you'll find that Lewis and I both wrote separate pieces about Thad. But a lot of it talks about his playmaking. And that's the place to start, because that is his standout elite skill, at least at this point in his career. And I found by looking through a lot of tape, a lot of film of what he did on the Spurs, as much as you can find over 26 games, right, that he was being used mostly as a hub, a handoff hub. And they ran a lot of actions with back cuts, and they ran a lot of split action to try and take advantage of his really fast processing as a passer. He sees plays, he makes the right one. He doesn't need a lot of touch time. He doesn't need to see plays develop in front of him and catch on late. No, he needs to see a smidge and he'll act on it. And he's pretty good at keeping the turnovers down, considering, and passing guys into high value buckets. This especially will pair well with both Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet, who I think, despite not having the incredible burst off of a pin down or a dribble handoff that, let's say, Norman Powell had, right? If you've been watching Raptors basketball for however many years, you can probably very wide in your mind, you can picture Norm Powell getting a handoff and turning the corner, getting all the way to the bucket for a dunk or a layup. He got to the rim really often off of handoffs, and he was one of the best handoff players, either as a shooter or as a driver in the NBA for the past 2 or 3 years. It's a really, really big part of his play types and how he scores. But while Gary Trent Jr. and Fred don't get to the rim like Norm, they really know how to work and cut off of and stop short of handoffs, and that becomes more of an interplay. That isn't that Thaddeus Young is just this post holding the ball and a guy like Norm comes and takes it and sprints off in the direction of the bucket. No, there's more interplay. There's more give and go aspects to it with Gary and with Fred, and I think both of them have a great sense for how to play give and go and to kind of not banter, but play with that type of play type, to mess around with it and to see what can be gained if a player over pursues, for example. Gary Trent Jr. oftentimes, if somebody's coming to break up a handoff, will stop short and backtrack and take a pass, and whether they switch or whether they just allow the shot, whatever happens, that's an advantage created, or that's something that the defense has to do when they respond. And Thaddeus Young, I think, most easily fits into what the Raptors do offensively as a handoff hub, especially given that Fred is, an all-star for sure. Maybe he'll be in an all-NBA conversation. Who knows? But he's fantastic. And Gary Trent Jr. has been lighting the world on fire from three, from mid-range. He's even been getting to the rim more often. And he's not being guarded by the best player on other teams. Like, is he taking guys like Jalen Green and Bryn Forbes to the rim? Yes, but who cares? He plays on a team with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet. It will be extremely rare for as long as he plays with these guys that he will ever be guarded by a top tier defender. And that's part of the reason why the Raptors are successful, is they are not egalitarian truly, but they are very dangerous from very many spots on the floor, a lot of different positions. And so they're finding weak spots. And Gary Trent Jr., as far as guys who are trying to track him off ball and then hang with him as a shot creator for himself, they fail at a lot of it. And I think that there's interplay for him to have with that, the same way there is for Fred. I think there's a lot of, ceiling there. And as far as working with guys like Pascal, OG, Barnes, Precious, whoever else, I think that there's the first thing that came to mind for me when I saw that Thaddeus Young was traded to the Raptors was the Funk Fest lineups, where they're not playing guards and they're getting super weird, that these lineups really like to defend with length, which Thaddeus Young can do. They like to turn the other team over, which Thaddeus Young has always been very good at generating steals without giving up a lot of advantage to offenses. And they like to be weird on offense. They like to board their own misses, and they rely on a lot of Pascal Siakam's offensive wizardry. And it really helps that they are able to board those extra possessions for when Pascal isn't absolutely mashing every defense that sits in front of him like he has been. But Thaddeus Young, I think, if he's in those open interpretive actions where the Raptors have a bunch of long guys always cutting and flying around the half court, I think that him as a passer can open up some set plays, some set actions, whether it's just him whipping the ball across the court to a guy I'm imagining a blind pig action where Thaddeus Young is either the guy above the break with the ball or the guy at the elbow waiting to get the blind pig pass. And one of Delano Banton or Scotty Barnes is going to run off that blind pig action, take the ball, and just smash into the rim or something like that. There's lots of different ways that you can use him, but I think that him being such a gifted passer, that makes it seem like, okay, maybe there's something good here. Maybe there's something that would be very, very useful. And if things go really well, he would fit in super, super well, both as a defender and as an offensive player. And Precious Achiuwa, we've seen that he's hit corner threes in these lineups. That makes sense. And if he's hitting those, these lineups get way more dangerous. The same thing applies for Thaddeus Young. If the Raptors are going to be able to play OG and Scotty and Pascal, and those guys can isolate and try things and post up to their heart's content, then I think that makes sense that Thaddeus Young will try to be an outlet of some sort, right? And I also think it makes sense that the Raptors, Nick Nurse, should be, going to the drawing board to try and figure out how to take advantage of Thad's remarkable, honestly, passing talent. And I think that's really interesting. That's all the best case scenario. So the worst case scenario is really bad. Now this I don't think is likely to happen, but the jokes are being made, and I think that they're funny, and I think that it's kind of leaning on, past trauma as a fan, or just the Goran Dragic thing. I was somebody who was completely fooled about the Goran Dragic stuff. I mean, he did play some games to start, but I thought he would be a fixture in the rotation, and it turns out he just wasn't interested whatsoever. And that's really too bad, because an optimized Goran Dragic would probably fit pretty damn well on this Raptors team, but c'est la vie anyway. But that is the exact thing that you're afraid of with Thaddeus Young. So the Raptors trade a first-round pick. And truthfully, they did trade a first-round pick. I don't want to undercut that. Trading first-round picks has become something that teams really, really give a damn about. And the Raptors, they should really give a damn about trading a first-round pick. You see that teams are hard-pressed to move away from their first-round picks, and I understand that. But it is worth mentioning that a second-rounder from Detroit is coming back. That is as close to a back end of the first round as you can possibly get from a second-rounder. Whether it's pick 31, 32, 33, 34, whatever, it's going to be around there. And you can set your watch to that, because Detroit is a very bad team. Not when they play the Raptors, but they're a very bad team. So the Raptors, they didn't lose the pick altogether. It's more like they moved back anywhere from, let's say, 8 to, 16, 17 slots. If the Raptors are played, or I guess, well, it can't be 17 because it's lottery protected. So anyway, 16 slots, perhaps. Like they maybe could have the 15th pick and have it go to San Antonio. They could have the 21st pick and have it go to San Antonio. But either way, if it's not in the lottery, that thing is going to San Antonio. And they're going to look at maybe they moved 10, 16 spots back. If there's a guy rising in the draft that you really like, or if there's somebody who's undervalued who you really like, you very well may lose your chance at drafting that guy. And maybe that would be a player that you honestly think could help change the future of your franchise. There's always that possibility. And the Raptors, OG Anunoby at 21, Pascal Siakam at 27. It matters when you lose draft position. It totally does. That being said, it's not just a straight first gone. There's some opportunity cost there. And I understand why some people will talk about how this makes it so that the Raptors don't have to guarantee a contract to whoever they draft at the end of the first round. But I hate that, dude. Yeah, I get it. I see what you're going for there, but why would that move a fan base? And if the fans have to understand cap minutia to be fans, to be sold on moves, then I don't think that's that's fine. But that doesn't mean that it's like an outright great tidy piece of business or something. I think that this is a very marginal trade for the Raptors, and it could be anywhere from like marginally positive, I think, to I think it could end up being quite negative depending on what happens the rest of the season. As the Raptors traded for Thad Young, the Cavs got Karis LeVert, for example. The 76ers got James Harden. The Nets got Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond. The Celtics got Derek White, and they gave up quite a bit to get him, but the point, and the Hawks are healthy and probably moving up, and the Hornets, they got Montrezl Harrell. Everybody that wants the Raptors spot or is in a spot that the Raptors want got better. I think that is objective. And so the play in, the back end, like the 4-5-6 situation in the East is uber competitive. And so all it would take, honestly, is a decent slide from the Raptors to completely put them in a position where they actually moved a substantial amount as far as draft position in this trade. So that's like the worst case scenario, is that everything pops off for other teams. The Raptors have some streak of bad luck or whatever else, and they end up giving up a huge exchange for a pick for a guy in Thaddeus Young that I really hope does work out. And I've enjoyed Thaddeus's game for a long time, but he hasn't been playing, and you have to see how he works with the team first. And it's marginally concerning that as soon as he got to the Raptors, every question that has been asked about him, they've responded a lot talking about leadership and presence. And you want to hear when you trade a first round pick. And again, I'm just going to say first round pick from here on out. Don't talk to me about the draft position because I already talked about that. You want to hear about on-court presence. And that's not owed, but that's just what people want to hear. And I'm sure Thad is going to join the Raptors one of these games, whether it's after it. More than likely, it seems like it's going to be after the All-Star break, and maybe he'll be acclimated, and maybe he needs to be able to play himself into shape a little bit. He talked about the struggle he had about staying in shape despite not getting run time and all that kind of stuff. Who knows, really? But he hasn't hit the court yet. Having a player come and you're staggering their entry into the rotation and stuff like that, it's a little bit concerning when you give up draft capital for that player, especially since Ben Simmons, for example, in the Nets situation, this is a guy who no doubt you understand given all the hubbub around him. And this is a guy dealing with mental health who says like he's working back from a position. He needs to get in a position where he can play, all that kind of stuff. That's happening. You have to deal with that. That's why he's having a staggered entry into the lineup. But Thaddeus Young doesn't have that. And he's also doesn't represent the ceiling, for example, that Ben Simmons does. But of course, the Raptors didn't trade James Harden. They traded a first-round pick. All this to say, I hope Thad comes in and gives like anywhere between 12 to 18 minutes every game. And that could be taken piecemeal from the likes of Siakam, Fred, Boucher, Precious, Banton, Champagny. It can be a lot of different things, and it can change depending on matchup. But I am very interested to see what that looks like. And my takeaway from this trade is that it is certainly not a home run. I think it would be very tough to examine this trade and come away saying, wow, the Raptors, they stole this one. And I understand why people are saying that about Gary Trent Jr. and the Norman Powell trade, because Gary's shooting the hell out of the ball, man. And he's playing defense at a clip that's just way better than years previous. Gary's been awesome. So I understand why people feel like that's a home run. But this one, it's tough to see where it becomes a home run, and it's easier to see where it becomes pretty hard to swallow. But with that being said, as Fred VanVleet said, Thad is here and he's going to be around and play. And Goran Dragic wasn't. So in that sense, you're upgrading the team. And the other half of that is, I believe in this team. I think the Raptors are a really, really strong team. I think that there's a lot of teams at the top end of the Eastern Conference that are dreading having to play this team as a first round. Not meaning that they see them as like, the Raptors are going to come in and steal this in 6, or the Raptors are going to come in and steal this in 7. They just know they're going to have to work hard for every single win, and you don't know what that looks like at the end of a series, especially when the Raptors have the type of top-end talent, especially the way they've been playing, like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet. I do not care about Pascal's bubble performance. That was an oddity. I honestly believe that. I am treating Pascal like he's going to perform somewhere near this regular season in the playoffs as well. If you disagree, that's okay, but I'm not looking to litigate that take from myself anyway. And so, yeah, not a lot of high-end potential for this trade, but I'm not very afraid of the low end of it either, because I think that the Raptors are good enough to stand their ground in this East. And I think that Thaddeus Young, there's a fairly reasonable avenue you can see to him helping them do that. And I think that's great. Do I wish that, like, man, it only took a second rounder or something like that? Hell yeah, I do. And especially when, some of the murmurs around the Raptors reporting was that Goran Dragic is like very, attractive. Guys want to take him on to open up cap space into the future. And maybe the Raptors will take on a nice budding young player who has money into the next couple years. And that won't mess up the Raptors cap situation, but will alleviate another team's. Then you look and, the Spurs are the team that got the first round pick, not the Raptors. And they did for Thaddeus Young, who was in, I would say, a very similar situation to Goran Dragic. Now, I'm not going to say that I know what was negotiated on behalf of Brad Stevens and the name of the San Antonio Spurs GM that is missing from me right now, or the conversations that Bobby Webster or Masai Ujiri had with them. I don't know what was offered. Actually, very, very few people do. And, there hasn't been really reporting on it either about there being, a race by the Raptors and the Celtics to see who could get Derek White, or the Raptors versus whoever else to see who could get Thaddeus Young, or a bunch of different teams. But there were rumors that teams wanted Dragic. And I think that maybe the Raptors, reporting or whatever, it came in a little flat when you look at the way the deadline happened. But I do not envy the situation that like Raptors insiders have, because the Raptors are as tight-knit an organization as it gets. And they obviously have been playing this one very close to the chest. And as is the case with like every single draft, trade deadline, whatever, the Raptors make the move that wasn't reported, that nobody saw coming, and them's the breaks. It's just surprising a little bit. If Thaddeus Young had been a name that was like, Thaddeus Young has been very popular at multiple trade deadlines, and as fans, as analysts, as people who work around, you can't help but take in that you're hearing a name a bunch. And I think that creates a situation where you naturally value that name higher just because you're hearing it more. And the fact that Thaddeus Young's name wasn't said at all for a very long time, that makes it so that, okay, the Raptors just got this guy. But Thaddeus Young is pretty good. I watched his film. I watched his film from this year, and I thought he was pretty damn good. So take that for what it's worth. But I think he's going to join the team. I think it's going to go reasonably well. And I think once the Raptors, you see how this pick turns out, you see who gets picked at the, mid to end of the first round, then you can begin to quibble about the decision they made. But I think as far as helping the team this year, they definitely didn't do as much as they possibly could. I think that's fair to say. But they did something that I think will be tangible. Okay. Trade talk over. Trade deadline is done. And before I get into the rest of the podcast, which I'll be talking about, I don't want to talk that much about the OKC and Rockets game because they were both fine, but I did a reaction podcast for that. I mean, I talked about both games. You can go listen to those if you're looking for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the games I expect to come, New Orleans and Minnesota, and then kind of, we'll do some potpourri. I think I'm using that word correctly. And we'll talk about the All-Star break and kind of what I might expect from Fred, and, looking forward to some fun things there. And I guess I'll pick like a winner from the dunk contest, the 3-point contest, and whatever. Oh yeah, there's like the Antetokounmpos and et cetera, doing the skills competition, right? Yeah, I'll do some picks for that as well. But before we get into that, let's hear from the folks over at Jack Health. Want to get to the top of your game? Jack Health at www.jack.health is an online service for men's health that handles the doctor's appointment, the prescription, and the shipping, which, by the way, is free. All you need to do is stay home and relax. They've got treatments for hair loss, quitting smoking, ED, and a whole lot more. If you're a guy, they've basically got you covered from head to toe. Order what you want, fill out some questions, and get it shipped straight to you. Free shipping and easy prescriptions. Do it all from the privacy of your own home at www.jack.health. Just as a side note, gosh, isn't it insane how, important hair is? It blows my mind, I gotta say. And that everybody, men's hairlines recede and they lose their hair and all that kind of stuff. I wonder if we would even find hair attractive on men if it wasn't even possible for them to lose it, right? Like, is that the reason why it became attractive, or does it signal something else to our baser needs? I couldn't say. Anyway, it interests me, not a whole bunch, but a little bit. I guess enough to spend time talking about it on the podcast. Okay, the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that is in flux, I would say, and will be until Zion returns. I think that's fair to point out. I think it's fair to say this is a team that needs Zion. This is a team that, in a lot of ways, is built to be around Zion, and he's just not there. The interesting thing, though, is that they are starting Devonte Graham and CJ McCollum, and they are getting absolutely shellacked. The Raptors, many fans for a long time said, you can't start Fred and you can't start Kyle. And then Fred started roughly half of the games in the championship winning season. He played one of the largest roles in the, especially the finals, right? And the back end of that Bucks series. And he started every single game from 2019-20 on. 2019-20, the season wherein they had a 60-win pace in the bubble shortened. Gosh, that period in time was just insane. And life continues to be insane. But anyway, the Raptors made the small guards lineup work. And it's because Kyle Lowry is as tenacious as it gets, as is Fred VanVleet. They are running uphill against the benefits of being tall, and they're still winning. That's impressive. CJ McCollum and Devonte Graham is a backcourt that is both small and bad at defense. This is a quandary for them. Who knows what they decide to do? Who knows if they decide to play maybe like Herb down a bit? Maybe they put Jackson Hayes in the lineup at 4. Who knows what they decide to do, or if that's a fix that they plan on making a change to. But they give up a lot of points. The Raptors coming to town with the possibility of Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes being able to generate a lot of mismatches against one of CJ or Devonte should be terrifying for the Pelicans, and a lot of breakdowns will probably come out of that. That's a huge advantage for the Raptors. And on the other side of things, Jonas Valanciunas should be an unbelievable load for the Raptors to handle. They're going to, we just saw them play Jokic, and he will initiate above the break way more than Jonas will. And that means that the Raptors have to worry about him in more places. That means they have to be a lot more dynamic in how they guard him. But the point being is that Jonas is large. If he gets the ball below the free throw line, while he cannot pass the same way Jokic can, the Raptors probably aren't going. Well, the Pelicans are just a better team around Jonas than the Nuggets are around Jokic. So the Raptors can ill afford to send a lot of attention, doubles, dig downs towards Jonas and really get away with that, especially if it's particularly uninspired rotations, dig downs, that kind of stuff. Jonas, while not one of the greatest passers out of doubles in the NBA, can make the pass, 1 or 2 passes away. He'll make enough reads, and, the Raptors are going to have to throw enough attention at it that it's going to be meaningful. So I'm interested to see how they decide to guard JV. The last time they played, which wasn't that long ago, about a month, JV had 20 and 17. And, that is a lot of box score stats, and box score stats aren't everything, but they're important. And that speaks to how the Raptors can sometimes struggle to contain a big like that, although they did a fairly good job of keeping Jonas off the offensive glass. So kudos for that, at least. But Jonas is absolutely going to make it more difficult for the Raptors to act out one of the main tenets of their offensive ethos, I should say, is that rebounding the hell out of the ball on their own end, like on the offensive glass. That the Raptors love to do that, and Jonas is going to make that much, much harder. And I'm interested to see if the Raptors just try and lean into supplementing the offense still with those looks after getting those second looks after getting the offensive rebound, or if they try to play a little bit more crisp as far as being a team that runs a little bit more set actions, or trying to embolden Pascal Siakam with maybe more pick and roll touches, because he's been so good in the mid range and his handle has been so tight that you wonder if he could become a guy for this game and maybe for a stretch of time, maybe forever, that can punish a dropping defense. He certainly did against the Nuggets. that was cool to see. He did against OKC as well when Derek Favors was there. So who knows what that looks like? And I mean, the mismatches are going to be there. Absolutely. The Raptors run a lot of actions to try and generate those. And the guys like OG and Scotty Barnes are going to beat Jonas down the floor. Will they beat, Herb Jones down the floor? Who knows? That's a tougher ask. But they'll also beat Brandon Ingram down the floor. And they're going to get post position on whoever's there. And it's not going to be Jonas or Herb Jones every time. So I'm very interested to see how the Raptors attack that. But, the Pelicans are a very talented team. They were on quite a run prior to the trade for CJ McCollum. They started out like 1-14. They were really, really bad to start the season. And you're left to wonder just what kind of game you're going to get from those guys. And the other game that happens before the All-Star break, I think is the most interesting game that the Raptors have played since, their week from hell. It's on Wednesday, and that's against the Timberwolves. Because they traded their coach. That's also that's also a good joke about the Thaddeus Young thing. There are two coaches that have been traded for first round picks, Doc Rivers and Thaddeus Young. The joke being that Thad isn't actually going to suit up for the Raptors. But anyway, the Raptors traded Chris Finch to the Wolves in the midst of the Tampa season because the Wolves moved on from their coach, and obviously there was some collusion going on with Chris. He joins the Timberwolves, and their defense this year is as close. The Heat play, there are quite a few similarities between the Raptors and the Heat, but not enough that I would say there's copycat aspects to it. But I would say there's copycat aspects to what the Timberwolves are doing compared to the Raptors on defense. And the same way there was copycat aspects to what the Pacers did last year with Nate Bjorkgren to the Raptors. This is the Nick Nurse coaching tree, right? And the Timberwolves have done a pretty damn good job of it the season over, but they've been struggling lately. Karl-Anthony Towns literally said he was tired. He's like, I'm tired, man. There's a great quote on how he feels about the defense and all the running around. And so with that being said, I believe that Chris Finch said that they might tone it back a little bit and try to get back into kind of a base package. I don't know what that's going to look like against the Raptors, but I can tell you that all the hallmarks of the Raptors defense that you as a Raptors fan have been able to recognize this season, the Timberwolves function very similarly on that end. They will give up rotation. They will X out like maniacs. They will rotate from a lot of places that other teams are not comfortable doing so, and they will give chase to a lot of parts on the floor and try and force passes, away from stars and move them into role players' hands and stuff like that. And they'll give up spot up 3-point shots as a result of all of that. They just have a bigger guy at the back end of it and maybe more. Jaden McDaniels, Josh Okogie, Jared Vanderbilt, I would say are all better defenders than Scotty Barnes currently. I don't know if that sticks forever. I don't know really, but those guys are like a really great trio of wings. D'Angelo Russell, believe it or not, has been he's been a good defensive quarterback. The communication is something that Wolves fans, Wolves analysts, you can on the broadcast and the coaching staff even, it's something that they rave about, that D'Angelo Russell is really good at quarterbacking. And he's also not a small guard. He's 6'5", and he gets in a lot of places. He disrupts actions, and he's moved quite well, especially as an off-ball player. So that's cool to see. Their defense has definitely been something that has helped propel them to above 500 for so long. They're 30-27 currently. I don't know what that looks like, when the Raptors play them, if it's one or two games, north or south. But I tell you what, defense has been a calling card of theirs. And on the other side of things, they're a very explosive offensive team. They can have droughts at times, though. And Pascal Siakam is a player who we see get frozen out of the Raptors offense at times because he's a big and he doesn't just control initiation all the time. Karl-Anthony Towns, as talented as he is, suffers from the same thing. If the Raptors can dissuade the Wolves from working through Towns quite a bit, that's where they're going to win this game, I think. And, Anthony Edwards there's always a chance that he might pop the hell off as a scorer. He's one of the most athletic players in the league. He's a marvel to watch. I think he's shooting 36% from three, which is really good given how tough his shot selection is. And I just think he's an incredible player. I can't wait to watch him. He's a guy I need to go see in person. He's a guy I want to talk to and interview. He's spectacular to me. And the collection of D'Angelo and uh, Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, I think, is a hell of a trio. You actually, like, a fun thing that I was able to put on, Twitter was that the Raptors ran a same horns quick hitter that the Nuggets love to run. And the Raptors ran it with Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby. And the Nuggets typically run this with Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., and Nikola Jokic. And I think that we're going to see like quite a few copycat looks from the Raptors and the Timberwolves. There are so many similarities in their playbooks and in how they defend those actions in the playbooks that I think it's going to be like a really, really fun game from that point of view. Not everybody cares about like set actions and what plays are being called and how it's being defended. Sometimes you just want to watch shots being made. And I think that Fred, Gary Trent Jr., Pascal, OG, Scotty, they'll be able to go toe to toe as far as shot making with Carl, D'Angelo Russell, and Anthony Edwards. So I think that game should be a blast, man. I think that'll be really, really fun. And on top of that, I think the Raptors are going to win both those games. I think they're going to beat the Pelicans. I think they're going to beat the Wolves. And I think they're going to go into the All-Star break with a 2-game win streak. I'm pretty confident about that. The Raptors are playing some really great basketball. And even though they lost to the Nuggets, I didn't think that was the worst game they could have possibly played. In fact, I thought they played really, really great stretches for so much of it and played some of the most beautiful basketball they've played all season, in fact. So, yeah, I think the Raptors are going to get back into the swing of things. I don't know if Thad shows up. I don't know what the rotations are going to be like. I don't know if Banton is still the guy that Nurse wants off the bench. He's pretty good against the Nuggets, so, I guess we'll see. But, yeah, I think that they're going to win these 2 games, and I think it's going to be all right heading into the All-Star break. I'm pretty optimistic, I got to say. Okay, All-Star weekend. Fred is there. We don't need to worry about too much else. You're going to see Scotty and Precious in the Rising Stars game. I think that that'll be a lot of fun, especially if Scotty gets a chance to do, one of those dunks that we occasionally see in like a video or in, the pregame warm-ups and stuff like that. But as far as Precious catching lobs or something in an up and down game, I think as many of those could go bad as, or, I think they're as likely to go bad as they are likely to go well. So I guess we'll see as far as that goes. But Fred, I think there's potential that he could pop off, as we've seen how he plays next to Pascal, over this stretch run. He can play next to great players and just absorb the 3-point attempts that come his way, and he can shoot the hell out of the ball. So I think there's a potential that maybe he'll stick in a fun lineup and he'll be the release valve, and he could go as high as 4 or 5 threes made in the All-Star game. And I hope he gets the opportunity to hoist them up. I really do. But he'll have an opportunity to hoist them up besides that because he's in the 3-point competition next to Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, Zach LaVine, CJ McCollum, Patty Mills, Karl Anthony Towns, himself, and Trae Young. Now, who do I think wins out of that? And I got to say, so Zach, CJ have been in it before, I believe. And, I think that they had middling returns. But Bane interests me a lot because he doesn't jump a bunch. And that's like Patty Mills, I think, is probably the most consistent. Well, Patty, Luke, Fred, and Patty, Luke, Fred, I think are the most consistent shooters there. But Patty is a guy who there's a lot of lift on his jumper. So he has to change it a little bit as far as, just trying to get the timing down for the 3-point competition. And then Luke and Fred, I don't want to pick Luke because I don't think he's got the juice for it, even though he's a great shooter. And if I pick Fred, I'm just being a homer. But, if I had to pick a guy, probably I'm looking at a grouping. I'm going to pick 4 guys, which is not great, which is a little bit self-indulgent. But I'm going to go with Fred, Carl, Bane, and Kennard. And I think one of those guys is going to win. So it's like a 50-50, really. So if Zach, CJ, Patty, or Trae win, you can come and you can cudgel me for my transgressions, I suppose. And how can I forget? Scotty Barnes is in the Taco Bell Skills Challenge. So I'm picking the rookies, Cade, Scotty, and Josh Giddey, who is also known as my dear friend Ben Pfeiffer. And they're going up against the Antetokounmpos. That's, also 905 Raptors a Jace. Alex Antetokounmpo, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Thanasis Antetokounmpo. And then there's the Cavs team, Jared Allen, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley. A really fun way to frame this competition, by the way, but also kind of alienating to some fan bases, I guess. And that I think that's something that they have in mind, obviously, with these competitions, is like, well, who's going to do what and who's going to be interesting and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, tough to say, but it's interesting for me, obviously, because I really like the Cavs. I really like the Antetokounmpos, and I really like Cade, Giddey, and Scotty Barnes. Barnes most of all, of course. The slam dunk competition: Cole Anthony, Juan Toscano Anderson, and Jalen Green, and Obi Toppin. I'm going with Jalen Green. He's a fantastic in-game dunker, but I think he's also going to have a ton of juice for the dunk contest. The Raptors just played him. You watch that game, you saw the bounce. You know, it's man, it is real. And I also think he has the coordination to be able to do some interesting stuff while he is skying through the air. Cole Anthony and Juan Toscano Anderson, I think like Cole is just so darn short relative to a lot of guys who compete in this competition, and his bounce doesn't look as explosive as some of the guys around his height who have competed, like John Wall, for example. He reminds me of when Damian Lillard participated in it, and you could tell Damian did well with his package, that his package was, I would say, more limited as a dunker. Juan Toscano Anderson, I think that's the wrong warrior, right? That should absolutely be Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga is a demon in the air. Like I was watching film today, and it's funny that he plays with both Clay and Steph now, and Steph for however much of the start of his career, the start of his rookie season anyway, but he was trying to set a screen for Steph, and they're trying to ice the screen. So Steph reversed the ball to the other, not corner, it was above the break, the other side, reverse play, kind of like in footy, and Kuminga just made a beeline for the rim. And the Kings who were defending it didn't know how to keep up with that because they were responding to the reversal of play. And as soon as it touched Clay's hands, he just threw it at the rim. It wasn't even a good pass. Kuminga just went up and got it and dunked it. And then the next play, they ran a pick and roll again. And so the Kings actually brought a guy lower for the tag so that they wouldn't be able to just reverse the play and throw that alley-oop again. And they gave Kuminga the ball in the short roll, and he did a little hop step into just this incredibly powerful dunk. And it was like, wow, this is a rookie who the other team didn't have a fix for a little bit. And it's just because he's an immensely overpowering athlete. He just dunks the hell out of the ball. That being said, I mean, I hope Juan is fun in the competition. I think, I hope you're super fun, Juan. I hope that's super enjoyable. And Obi Toppin can dunk the hell out of the ball, but I think it's going to be Jalen Green. All told, there's a lot of Raptors adjacent stuff in the All-Star weekend. It should have Pascal Siakam. Absolutely, it should. It's tough to see this happening with how good Pascal is, knowing that he's better than he's ever been, and knowing that every team that he faces is shaking in their boots and is just like, holy hell, how do we stop him? We can't stop him. What do we do otherwise? Is there some saving grace here? And there just isn't. He's too powerful. He's too good at basketball right now. Can't be stopped. But all that being said, there's going to be a lot of Scotty during this weekend, which NBA fans and Raptor fans both should be able to enjoy, because Scotty is so damn lovable and such a fun, effervescent human being that you're going to feel it through the screen when he's having fun in the skills challenge or the Rising Stars game, whatever, right? It's going to be fun. He's going to be in it. And then Alex Antetokounmpo and Fred and all this other stuff going on. I think it's going to be a blast. As if you're into the spectacle of All-Star Weekend, then hell yeah, indulge in the spectacle, and I hope you really enjoy it. And if you're not into the spectacle of All-Star Weekend, man, really, if you have time to do other stuff instead, just try and do something you love, I hope. I don't know what that looks like for you personally. I initially was going to go on a snowboarding trip to the mountains, but that got canceled. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do instead. Probably watch this stuff, to be honest with you, but remains to be seen. I think that's it for the podcast. Thanks for tuning in with me. I hope it was enjoyable. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.